Hello, welcome to the Learn English Lab. Today's advanced English listening practice focuses on a critical skill, listening accuracy, and welcome back to the deep dive. We are exploring a topic that's, well, it's profoundly relevant to everyone listening right now. Doesn't matter if you're learning a new language or just, getting through your day.
Absolutely.
The truth is, in our notification-saturated world, this hyper-connected life we lead, we are constantly bombarded. Just noise, noise, noise.
It's overwhelming.
Right. But truly hearing and accurately processing that information, that's listening accuracy. And it's not just some soft skill anymore, is it? It feels more like a cognitive superpower.
That's a great way to put it, a superpower. Because it really is foundational for complex negotiations, professional success.
But even just deep, trusting personal relationships, you need it everywhere.
You really do. The difficulty, I think, is that most people treat listening like it's passive. Like hitting record on a device, just capturing sound waves.
But it's not like that at all.
Not even close. It's incredibly active. A complex, multi-layered cognitive symphony, really. And like any finely tuned system, it's very vulnerable to disruption.
And today we're really pulling apart the two biggest disruptors, the most powerful forces influencing that system. Stress, which often feels like an enemy, an adversary.
Yeah, saboteur.
Yeah. And focus, which is our essential ally, our tool.
Exactly. And our mission for this deep dive, it's to go beyond just defining these terms. We want to unpack the specific neurobiological facts. We want to dissect how chronic stress really sabotages the brain's ability to process nuance.
Get into the mechanics.
Right. And explore how intentional focus can sharpen your comprehension, make it, razor sharp. By understanding these mechanics, we really hope to equip you, the listener, with actionable knowledge, tools to reclaim your ability to truly hear and understand the world.
Okay, let's dive in. Where do we start with this complex machinery?
Well, to really get it, we have to appreciate the incredible journey sound takes to become meaning. It's not instant. It's this dynamic, multi-stage neurological event.
Okay, so walk us through that. It starts physically, right? The sound wave itself.
It does. Purely mechanical at first. Sound waves, just vibrations in the air, are collected by your outer ear, funnel down to the eardrum.
And the eardrum vibrates.
It vibrates. And then these vibrations hit the middle ear, where you have three tiny, tiny bones, the ossicles. They act like little levers.
Amplifying the sound.
Massively amplifying it with amazing efficiency. This amplified vibration then reaches the cochlea, that's in the inner ear. It's the small, spiral-shaped structure.
Like snail shell.
Exactly like a snail shell, and it's lined with these highly specialized hair cells. This is the crucial point. Right here, inside the cochlea, that mechanical energy finally gets converted
into electrical signals the brain can actually use.
Precisely. Neural signals that the brain can read.
So we've got an electrical signal. Where does it go first? What's the brain's initial sorting office, so to speak?
Good analogy. The signals travel immediately via the auditory nerve straight to the brainstem.
Okay.
The brainstem acts as that first relay station. It does crucial subconscious work. Sorting, timing, prioritizing this huge stream of auditory data. It's doing basic filtering, pattern recognition.
Like figuring out where a sound came from.
Yes, sound localization, recognizing simple patterns. It does all that lightning fast before passing the refined signal up to higher centers.
And the next stop is the thalamus, the brain's main sensory switchboard.
That's right. The thalamus is like the central hub, the staging area for sensory info. It directs the auditory information to its final destination in the cortex.
Which is the auditory cortex.
Primarily in the temporal lobe, yes. The auditory cortex is where these raw signals are processed into things we perceive consciously. Pitch, loudness, timbre.
So that's how I know if it's a high shriek or a low rumble.
Exactly. It gives you the basic acoustic qualities of the sound, the what's of the sound.
But you made a key distinction earlier. Hearing the what isn't the same as listening for meaning. How does the brain bridge that gap? Go from sound quality to understanding?
That's where it gets really complex. We move into the deeper association areas. From that primary auditory cortex, the signals spread out, flowing into complex neural networks.
Like Wernicke's area. For language.
Wernicke's area is central, yes, for language comprehension, understanding semantics. But it's not just one spot. The information integrates across different lobes, frontal, parietal. It taps into our vast stores of semantic memory.
Our internal encyclopedia of concept.
Right, and our episodic memory, the context, the history of past conversations, the emotional flavor, this whole integration process, that's what transforms isolated sounds into, into meaningful ideas.
It sounds incredibly coordinated. Like there must be a control tower managing all this traffic. That's got to be the prefrontal cortex, the PSC, right?
Yeah.
The command center for accuracy.
Absolutely indispensable. The PFC governs our executive functions. These are the higher level skills that dictate the fidelity, the accuracy of how we process that incoming signal. Without strong executive control from the PFC, all that data is just, well, it's fragmented noise.
Okay, let's break down those critical executive functions. First up, working memory. You called it the mental scratch pad. Why is that so vital for listening?
Working memory is your brain's temporary holding space. It's RAM, if you like. When someone speaks a long, complex sentence, you need to hold the beginning part in your mind.
Long enough to connect it to the end.
Exactly, to integrate it all. If your working memory is impaired, maybe by stress or distraction, that sentence just fragments. You literally lose the thread. You forget the start by the time they finish.
Which makes complex communication impossible. And this requires active attention control, doesn't it? We need both selective attention, choosing what to listen to,
And tuning into one voice in a crowd.
and sustained attention, sticking with it, maintaining that focus, say, through a whole meeting or lecture.
Definitely. And these rely on specialized attention networks in the brain. There's the ventral network, which is more bottom-up, reactive. It grabs your attention for unexpected things like a loud bang or your phone pinging.
That pulls you away.
Right. But for active, accurate listening, we heavily rely on the dorsal network. This is top-down, goal-directed. It's what you use when you decide to focus. Active listening is basically the dorsal network hard at work, maintaining that intentional vigilance.
Then there's inhibition. This sounds crucial. We have to actively block things out.
We do. Both external noise, the traffic outside, the humming air conditioner, and, perhaps more importantly, our own internal chatter.
The mental to-do list. The argument you had earlier. The self-criticism.
All of it. That internal noise can be deafening. The brain manages suppression using structures like the anterior cingulate cortex, the ACC, working closely with the PFC. The ACC detects conflict, like when your goal is to listen, but your mind wanders.
And the PFC steps in to dampen the distraction.
It tries to, using inhibitory neurotransmitters. But if that system is tired or overloaded, the internal noise wins, and you just can't isolate the speaker's signal effectively anymore.
Okay, one more executive function. Cognitive flexibility. Why does being flexible matter for listening accurately?
Because conversations aren't static, they shift. New information comes up. Someone's tone changes. A good listener needs to be able to shift perspective quickly.
Reevaluate your initial interpretation.
Instantly. If you get stuck on your first impression, maybe a wrong one, you miss the real meaning. Cognitive flexibility allows you to continuously update your understanding as the conversation unfolds. It stops you from getting rigid in your thinking.
So it's this incredible orchestra. Mechanics, routing, memory, control. Perfectly tuned when it works.
A finely tuned orchestra, yes.
But what happens when we throw a wrench in the works? The most common wrench.
Ah, yes, that wrench is stress. Stress. Biologically speaking, it's the body's response to perceived demands or threats. It kicks off the fight or flight mechanism.
An ancient survival system.
Exactly. Designed for escaping predators, not for, understanding a complex email or a subtle negotiation tactic.
And we need to be clear about the difference between short-term and long-term stress.
Absolutely critical distinction. Acute stress is that short burst, the immediate response, like right before a deadline. It can actually sharpen focus for a moment.
Give you a little boost.
It can. But the real enemy of listening accuracy, the silent saboteur, is chronic stress. That prolonged, persistent state from ongoing pressure, difficult job, money worries, relationship
The
problems.
stuff that grinds you down.
That's the one. And it's so damaging because it starts to compromise the physical structures of the brain's control center.
Okay, what's happening hormonally during chronic stress? What's the internal alarm system doing?
The main culprit is the sustained release of cortisol, the primary stress hormone. Chronically high levels of cortisol are actually neurotoxic.
Toxic to the brain.
Yes. They can cause dendrites, the connections between neurons, to prune back. They can shrink the actual volume of critical brain areas, specifically the PFC and the hippocampus.
The very areas we need for executive function, attention, and memory.
Exactly. The cortisol physically damages them. It's like running your computer's processor constantly at maximum voltage. Eventually, components start to degrade, physically break down.
Wow. So stress isn't just a feeling, it's actively attacking the brain's ability to think clearly and listen well.
That's the crucial takeaway. And alongside cortisol, you also get the continuous release of adrenaline and noradrenaline. These hormones jack up your heart rate, heighten sensory awareness, preparing muscles for action.
Fight or flight.
Right. But the problem for listening is that all the body's resources get diverted to these basic survival functions. Energy is pulled away from the subtle, higher-level cognitive processing needed for accurate, nuanced communication. You're running on an emergency power setting, basically.
And that emergency setting doesn't have enough juice for careful listening.
Not even close.
So how does this manifest? The first cognitive hit you mentioned is reduced working memory capacity.
It gets severely limited. When the PFC is swimming in cortisol, it struggles to hold on to information, to update that mental scratch pad. So if you're stressed and someone's giving you complex instructions or telling a detailed story,
It just falls apart in your head.
it fragments. You can't hold the beginning long enough to connect it to the end. You end up asking for repeats, or worse, you just misunderstand and make mistakes based on incomplete information.
And this impaired memory leads right into narrowed attention, what people call cognitive tunnel vision.
Yes. The brain in survival mode focuses intensely, almost obsessively, on the perceived threat, or on the most salient, often negative part of what's being said.
So you latch onto one word.
Exactly. Maybe the speaker uses a word like problem or delay or mistake. The stressed brain zooms in on that word, filtering out all the context around it, all the nuance, the mitigating factors, the positive points. They just vanish.
The brain edits the message to confirm its fear.
That's a good way to put it. It's an evolutionary advantage focusing on the threat being horribly misused in a communication context.
This sounds like it demolishes inhibition and cognitive flexibility too.
It really does. Under chronic stress, those executive functions become rigid. That ability we talked about, shifting perspective quickly, it disappears. You get stuck in fixed patterns of interpretation.
Less able to analyze things objectively.
Much less. You struggle with verbally presented problems, decision-making becomes harder, and you're less likely to update your view when new information comes along. You become locked into your initial, often negative or defensive interpretation.
And almost cruelly, stress also seems to make us more distractible, not less. Increased distractibility.
Yes, the filtering mechanism breaks down. Stress weakens the ACC's ability to dampen those irrelevant signals we talked about. So external noises, the phone buzzing, people talking nearby seem louder, more intrusive.
But it's the internal noise too.
Oh, much worse. The internal chatter, the worry loops, the anxieties, the self-doubt gets amplified. The stressed brain can't inhibit it. It becomes this constant loud monologue that drains your cognitive resources. You just can't focus on the speaker.
And maybe the most damaging effect in conversations is the emotional biases and misinterpretation that results.
Definitely. When you're stressed, you're hypervigilant, you're defensively wired. So you're far more likely to read negative intentions into neutral or even ambiguous communication.
Like assuming someone's critical when their tone is just flat.
Exactly. Or interpreting a pause as disapproval or dismissal. Your bias filters the information. Listening shifts from trying to understand to trying to defend yourself, which almost inevitably leads to misunderstandings, friction, even conflict.
And that classic example, the cocktail party effect, being able to focus on one conversation in a noisy room that just goes out the window under stress, doesn't it?
Completely. Because the filtering mechanism, the PFC, is overloaded and compromised. Following one voice amid background noise requires significant cognitive effort. When stress depletes that cognitive energy, all you get is auditory static. The message becomes distorted, fragmented, unclear.
Okay, so if stress is the static, the interference, then focus is like the tuning dial. It's the intentional sharpening of the signal. Let's shift gears and talk about focus, our vile ally for listening accuracy.
Right. Focus, or intentional attention, it's basically the cognitive spotlight, the brain's selective filter. We consciously direct it towards the information we need.
And without it, everything is just noise.
Undifferentiated noise, exactly. When you apply focus, it actually enhances the neural representation of the speaker's voice, makes it stand out.
We rely on a few key components of attention for deep listening. Let's start with selective attention.
Selective attention is the star player in that cocktail party effect. It's the ability to lock onto one specific voice, one stream of sound, and actively suppress everything else competing for your attention.
And that's the dorsal attention network doing its job.
That's the dorsal network, actively prioritizing and amplifying the neural signals from your target while dampening others.
Okay, then there's sustained attention, vigilance. This is about keeping that spotlight steady over time, right?
Yes, maintaining focus for extended periods. This is absolutely crucial for anything involving absorbing a lot of information. Long meetings, lectures, complex technical discussions, detailed project updates.
Resisting distractions, both external and internal.
And resisting mental fatigue, which can cause your focus to just drift away even if there are no distractions.
And the third one you mentioned was divided attention. We all think we can multitask, listen while checking email. What's the real cost?
The cost is accuracy and depth. Neurologically, the spotlight gets split. Neither task listening or scrolling receives the full cognitive resources needed for deep encoding and processing.
So you only get fragments of both.
Exactly. Studies consistently show that when attention is divided, the quality of working memory storage plummets. You retain only shallow pieces of the conversation. For genuine, accurate listening, single tasking isn't just helpful, it's pretty much mandatory.
So the dorsal network, guided by the PFC, is boosting the signal. Let's detail how sharp focus really ramps up accuracy. First, a better signal-to-noise ratio.
Yeah, focus acts like a sophisticated audio equalizer in your brain. It doesn't just block noise, it actively boosts the neural signal of the voice you're listening to relative to everything else, background sound, internal thoughts.
So speech becomes clearer, even in noisy places.
Much clearer, even if the speaker is quiet or the room is bad acoustically.
Second benefit, enhanced working memory encoding.
Right. With the full spotlight of focus, information gets encoded much more effectively, more robustly into your working memory. A focused listener can group information into larger, more meaningful chunks.
Not just remembering words, but ideas.
Exactly. Thematic units, the flow of an argument, complex narratives. It makes integrating the whole message much easier.
Which leads naturally to deeper processing, moving beyond just the literal meaning.
Yes, deep processing kicks in our semantic memory, our contextual understanding. We start to infer intent, grasp subtleties, understand the meaning behind the words. It's the difference between just registering vocabulary and truly comprehending the speaker's motivation and full message.
And a really focused listener can even start anticipating and predicting what's coming next.
Absolutely. Our brains are constantly trying to predict. Based on the context, the patterns of language, our prior knowledge, a focused brain makes rapid predictions about where the speaker is going.
Which makes comprehension smoother.
Faster and more robust. It helps you bridge any little gaps. Maybe if the speaker hesitates or if there's a brief external noise, you can fill it in more easily because you're already anticipating the flow.
And lastly, focus allows for accurate integration of all the cues, not just the words.
This is critical. An attentive listener doesn't just hear the words. They integrate them with the nonverbal signals, the speaker's facial expression, their body language, subtle shifts in vocal tone. This holistic listening gives you a much more complete and accurate picture of the speaker's true emotional state and underlying intention.
Things the stressed, tunnel vision brain just completely misses.
Completely misses.
And we should note, the type of focus needed can change, right? Depending on the goal.
Oh, certainly. You might need active listening focus to confirm details and facts, or critical listening focus to evaluate an argument. Empathetic listening requires focus on emotional cues. Appreciative listening, say to music or a story, uses focus differently again. But underlying all of them, intentional focus is the engine. Now, the relationship between stress and focus isn't simple. It's this dynamic tension. They collide. And when stress is high, that collision systematically dismantles listening accuracy.
Okay, let's unpack that vicious cycle. How does stress sabotage focus on a neural level? Where's the weak link?
The weak link is the PFC's capacity for cognitive control. Remember how cortisol damages it? Well, high cortisol degrades the communication pathways the PFC needs to regulate attention effectively.
It weakens the control tower.
Precisely. And this weakened state allows anxiety to generate that intense internal chatter. The worries, the ruminations, the self-doubt, they become the dominant signal. They act as powerful internal distractors.
Hijacking the spotlight.
Completely hijacking it. They consume those precious cognitive resources, pulling the mental spotlight entirely inward, away from the person speaking to you.
That internal monologue screaming louder than the speaker, that must be a huge drain.
It creates what psychologists call cognitive load overload. We've established listening itself is already demanding, right? decoding sound, accessing memory, inferring meaning. That's high cognitive load.
Right.
Stress doesn't just reduce your capacity to handle that load, it adds another heavy burden. The simultaneous task of processing your own anxiety, your worry, your physiological arousal.
Like trying to run too many demanding programs on an old computer with not enough RAM?
That's a perfect analogy. The system either freezes up or slows to a crawl. With listening, the result is massive comprehension errors, missed information, fragmentation.
Okay, that's the bleak picture.
Okay.
But there's a hopeful side too, right? The virtuous cycle, where focus buffers stress. How can intentional attention fight back?
We can actually leverage the brain's plasticity, its ability to change and adapt. Engaging in practices like mindfulness training, which is essentially sustained attention practice, strengthens that dorsal attention network.
You're building up the focus muscle.
You really are.
Yeah.
So when a wave of stress hits, maybe anxious thoughts start bubbling up, a mind trained in mindfulness has a better capacity to notice those thoughts without getting swept away.
Observe them without judgment.
Yes. And then consciously, gently redirect the attention back to the breath, back to the present moment, back to the speaker. This significantly reduces the power of those internal distractors to hijack your focus.
This idea of finding the right level of alertness reminds me of the Yerkes-Dodson law, that relationship between arousal and performance.
Yes, the Yerkes-Dodson curve. It's fundamental here. It shows that performance, including listening accuracy, increases with arousal, but only up to an optimal point.
Too little arousal is bad too.
Right. Low arousal means you're bored, maybe tired, disengaged. Accuracy is poor because you lack alertness. Then there's the peak, optimal arousal. You're alert, engaged, focused, but calm. That's the sweet spot, being in the zone.
But if you go past that peak,
accuracy plummets. You enter high arousal, that's overwhelming stress. The PFC starts to shut down, tunnel vision kicks in, performance collapses.
So the goal for effective listening isn't necessarily zero stress, which is often unrealistic, but managing ourselves to stay in that optimal zone, alert, but not overwhelmed.
That's the key, maintaining optimal arousal. And we should also touch on shared stress or emotional contagion.
Oh, right. Catching someone else's stress.
Exactly. If the person speaking to you is clearly tense, maybe angry or rushed, their stress can literally transfer to you. Your own cortisol can spike just by being around them, which then compromises your ability to listen calmly and accurately.
But the reverse can be true too.
It can. A listener who practices focused self-regulation, who stays calm and centered, can actually act as a grounding force in the conversation. They can help de-escalate the tension, creating a space where clearer communication becomes possible for everyone involved.
This isn't just brain science theory, is it? These dynamics of stress and focus have huge, real-world consequences, especially in professional settings.
Huge consequences. Think about critical business situations like meetings and negotiations. If a negotiator is stressed, maybe worried about failing, or just focused on planning their next point,
their attention narrows. Tunnel vision again.
Right. They become incapable of hearing the full message from the other side. They might miss a subtle shift in position, a key concession hidden in the language, a nonverbal cue that signals compromise. Stress literally makes them deaf to crucial nuances,
leading to bad deals or missed opportunities.
Absolutely. And think about leadership. The impact is organization-wide. A leader who's overwhelmed by their own stress, constantly distracted.
Maybe by emails pinging during a one-on-one.
Exactly. They start missing the vital, often subtle cues from their team. Signs of burnout, brewing conflict, low morale, quiet disengagement. That failure of focused, empathetic listening means they don't grasp the reality on the ground.
And that leads to poor decisions, because they're operating on incomplete or inaccurate information about their own team.
Precisely. The leader's internal stress filters out the ground truth.
Okay, let's consider some really high-stakes situations. Emergency services must be a prime example.
Absolutely critical. Think of a 911 dispatcher. They operate under intense, often relentless stress. They have to maintain absolute focus despite potentially chaotic, emotional, fragmented audio coming in.
A misheard address, a misunderstood symptom.
Can have catastrophic life or death consequences. That's why their protocols heavily emphasize specific, focused questioning techniques, ways to cut through the stress and ensure accuracy even under extreme pressure.
We see similar risks in medical consultations, right? The doctor-patient exchange.
Hugely important and vulnerable to stress and lack of focus on both sides. If the doctor is stressed, maybe rushing due to a heavy caseload,
or if the patient is anxious about their health,
critical information gets missed. Studies show things like doctors interrupting patients too soon, preventing them from fully describing symptoms, or patients mishearing or misremembering treatment instructions or dosages because their own anxiety is interfering with their ability to process the information accurately.
Small listening errors with potentially big health impacts.
Very big.
Shifting to our personal lives, the impact on empathetic conversations seems profound.
It really is. In our closest relationships, if we're distracted by our own worries, our internal chatter, we might hear the words someone says, but we completely miss the emotion behind them.
The vulnerability, the unspoken need for support.
Exactly. We fail to truly hear their feelings, not just their statements. And that failure to connect, to truly understand on an emotional level, is probably the biggest source of erosion in trust and intimacy over time.
And when conflict inevitably arises, accurate listening often goes right out the window because of conflict resolution stress.
Conflict triggers the fight or flight response powerfully. Stress spikes. And what happens? We shift immediately into defensive listening.
Not listening to understand, but listening to find flaws.
Listening to prepare your rebuttal. Your focus isn't on objectively processing what the other person is saying. It's on scanning their words for weaknesses, for points you can attack, while simultaneously formulating your counter-argument.
So true comprehension is impossible in that state.
Fundamentally impossible. Accurate listening requires openness, and defensive listening is the opposite of open.
Finally, let's touch on language learning. For students trying to acquire a new language, stress must be a huge barrier.
It's a significant barrier. The anxiety around making mistakes, the fear of not understanding a native speaker, even if it's relatively low level, that chronic stress inhibits the brain's ability to efficiently encode new information.
Makes it harder to pick up new words or grammar.
Much harder. Distinguishing subtle new sounds, grasping unfamiliar sentence structures, these things require focused cognitive resources. If those resources are being diverted to manage anxiety, the learning process slows down considerably. It's a perfect example of stress hindering the ability to listen and internalize new information. Okay, so we've painted a picture of the challenges, but the really good news is that these aren't fixed states. Attention regulation, stress management, these are skills. They're trainable.
We can build an arsenal of strategies.
A comprehensive arsenal, exactly. We can learn to mitigate stress and actively enhance focus. Let's start with calming the system down, reducing that cortisol load.
What are the foundational techniques for that, for building resilience in the PFC?
Mindfulness and meditation are probably top of the list because at their core, they are attention training exercises.
Practicing focus.
Practicing noticing where your attention is. They teach you to observe your thoughts, that internal chatter, without immediately reacting or judging them. This reduces their emotional power, their ability to hijack your focus, and it strengthens the neural networks involved in self-regulation, counteracting that automatic fight or flight response.
So you gain more conscious control over your internal state. What about in the moment, when you feel that stress rising, heart pounding, anxiety gripping you? What's a quick physiological reset?
Breathing exercises. Simple, but incredibly powerful. Deep, slow, diaphragmatic breathing from your belly sends a direct signal to your nervous system that the danger has passed.
It activates the rest and digest system.
The parasympathetic system, yes. Techniques like box breathing, maybe inhaling for 4 seconds, holding for 4, exhaling for 4, holding for 4, can quickly downregulate those physical stress symptoms. It brings you back into balance, maybe right before you walk into a difficult conversation.
And underpinning all of this is basic physical care. We can't ignore sleep hygiene.
Absolutely non-negotiable. Chronic stress gets way worse with sleep deprivation. The brain needs sleep to repair, consolidate memories, and restore cognitive balance, especially in the PFC. Consistently aiming for 7 to 9 hours isn't a luxury. It's fundamental brain maintenance for focus and stress resilience.
There's also a mental technique you mentioned, reframing stress, changing how we think about it.
Yes, this taps into that Yerkes-Dodson idea. We can learn to shift our perception, particularly of mild to moderate arousal, instead of interpreting those butterflies in your stomach as debilitating fear.
You relabel it as readiness.
Exactly. You consciously reframe it. Okay, my body is getting alert, preparing me to focus and perform well. This helps channel that adrenaline into useful, focused energy rather than letting it spiral into counterproductive anxiety.
Okay, so those help manage the stress side. Now let's talk about actively sharpening the focus spotlight itself. Specific active listening practices.
These are techniques that force your brain to engage deeply. One of the most powerful is paraphrasing and summarizing what the speaker has said.
Saying it back in your own words.
Right. Like, okay, so if I'm hearing you correctly, the main point is, or let me see if I've got this. The 3 key steps are X, Y, and Z. This does 2 things. It confirms your understanding for the speaker, ensuring accuracy. And it forces your brain to actively synthesize and structure the information, which encodes it much more strongly than passive listening.
It makes you process it properly.
Okay.
And to combat that modern plague of divided attention, we need to commit to single tasking.
It sounds simple, but it's crucial. Actively eliminate distractions during important conversations. Put the phone away, like properly away, not just face down. Close unnecessary tabs on your computer. Turn off notifications.
Dedicate your cognitive resources fully
To the speaker. This prevents the attentional drain of multitasking and allows your dorsal attention network to fully lock onto the conversation.
What about setting yourself up for success beforehand? Pre-preparation.
Often overlooked, but very effective. If you know you're going into an important meeting or conversation, take a few minutes beforehand, review the agenda, refresh your memory on the topic or the people involved.
Gives your brain a framework.
Exactly. It creates mental slots where new information can fit. Your brain can anticipate, organize, and integrate what you hear much more efficiently than if you're trying to process everything completely fresh on the fly.
And if you need to take notes during a dense conversation, strategic note-taking.
The key word is strategic. Don't try to transcribe everything the person says. That frantic writing actually pulls your attention away from fully listening and understanding in the moment.
Focus on the essentials.
Yes, focus on capturing keywords, main ideas, decisions made, action items, just the core structure. This helps offload your working memory without sacrificing real-time comprehension.
Okay, finally, let's bring it all together with the highest level. Integrating emotional intelligence, EI, into listening.
EI provides the overarching framework for managing ourselves in communication. It starts with self-awareness. That means recognizing your own internal state. Noticing when you are starting to feel stressed or defensive, or when one of your personal biases is maybe coloring how you're hewing things.
Knowing your own triggers.
Knowing your triggers. And then EI gives you self-regulation. This is the ability to manage those impulses that derail listening. The impulse to interrupt, to jump in with your own story, to react defensively, to mentally prepare your rebuttal while someone is still speaking.
Holding back those reactions creates space.
It creates the quiet, objective mental space needed for the speaker to feel truly heard. And paradoxically, by regulating yourself, you enhance your own listening accuracy. And perhaps the most powerful component of EI for listening is empathy. This isn't just about being nice, it's about actively seeking to understand the other person's perspective, their feelings, the unstated needs or emotions that might be driving their words.
Looking beyond the literal words, integrating those nonverbal cues we talked about.
Yes, empathy pushes you to do that. It helps you counteract those stress-induced negative biases we discussed earlier. It allows you to get a much more complete, accurate, and compassionate understanding of the whole message, the whole person. #outro. So we've really journeyed through the mechanics of listening, haven't we? It's this intricate neural dance. We've seen how stress can systematically impair our working memory, narrow our attention.
Sounds like that saboteur.
Right. And how focus, intentional focus, is the essential trainable tool we have to amplify comprehension, to find meaning, to connect. Mastering listening, it really comes down to managing that constant dynamic tension between these two powerful forces within us.
It really underlines that conscious, focused listening isn't just a passive skill. It's more than a technique. It feels like a profound act of respect, actually.
It is.
And it's clearly a critical building block for connection, for trust, for success, in pretty much every area of life. We're not just passive receivers of sound waves. We have the power to cultivate this skill, to make it one of our greatest cognitive strengths.
And maybe a final thought to leave our listeners with. In a world that seems to reward speaking, loudness, broadcasting, consider this. How much of what you think you know about the people closest to you, your colleagues, your partner, your friends, is actually based on what you project onto them? Or maybe what you wish they meant, versus what you truly accurately heard and comprehended from them?
That's a powerful question. That pursuit of genuine accuracy really defines the quality of our connections. If you found this deep dive valuable and insightful, we ask you to please like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel.
Hello, welcome to the Learn English Lab. Today's deep dive, advanced English listening practice topic name is Why We Miss Words When Listening in English. You know, we've all had that moment, right? You're really tuned in, listening hard in English. Maybe it's a meeting or a film or just chatting, and then bam, a word just disappears. Or maybe a whole phrase. It's like, oh, like your brain just hit skip. Suddenly there's this gap, this blank space in your understanding, and it's incredibly frustrating. You're nodding, trying to keep up, but inside you're thinking, wait, what did they just say? It happens to pretty much everyone learning English, even at advanced levels. So today, we're doing a deep dive into exactly why this happens, our mission. To take that frustration and turn it into, well, a practical roadmap for getting better at listening. Because usually it's not about your hearing or even not knowing enough words. It's actually this really complex mix of how language works, how our brains process things, and sometimes even, how we feel psychologically. We want to give you the tools to figure out what's going on so you can build up that resilience and really start understanding clearly.
That's a great way to put it. And I think the first step really is to appreciate that listening isn't passive. It's not just sound washing over you. It's actually one of the most active, mentally demanding things our brain does. It's like conducting a symphony, coordinating all these different neural processes just to make sense of speech in real time, converting noise into meaning, understanding pitch, volume, context, intent. It's all happening incredibly fast all at once.
Okay, let's get into that. Let's unpack the machinery, as you said, because to fix the problem, we need to understand how comprehension is supposed to work first, right? What really struck me is just how many layers there are. It's not one step, it's like a whole sequence happening in split seconds.
Exactly. It's a multi-stage cognitive effort happening incredibly rapidly. And if any single one of those stages falters or slows down, that's when words get missed. The whole chain breaks. So first off, you've got acoustic processing. That's the ears doing their job, capturing the raw sound waves, pitch, loudness, the quality of the sound.
Okay, basic sound capture.
Right. Your temporal lobe turns those vibrations into electrical signals the brain can understand, basically distinguishing speech from, say, background noise.
Got it. So the brain knows something was said. What's next?
Next up is phonological processing. This is where the brain starts identifying the individual speech sounds, the phones, like the B sound, the A sound, the T sound in bat. It compares these incoming sounds to this huge library of sounds it knows exist in English. This is also where things like understanding different accents start to come into play, recognizing those subtle variations.
Oh, okay. So it's matching the raw sound to known English sounds.
Precisely. Then comes lexical access. The string of sounds identified, like bait, gets matched to words in your mental dictionary, your lexicon. And what's really fascinating here is the speed. The brain doesn't just find one match, it often activates several potential candidates almost instantly. Hearing cane might briefly bring up can, candle, candy.
Wow. Okay. So it pulls up a few options, like a quick mental search. That must use up some brain power.
Oh, absolutely. It's resource intensive. And while that's happening, the next process is already kicking off, syntactic processing. As words are recognized, the brain immediately starts figuring out the grammar. Is this word a subject, a verb, an object? How do they fit together? Building the sentence structure.
Like finding the scaffolding of the sentence.
Exactly. And once the structure is somewhat clear, we move to semantic processing. This is extracting the literal meaning. Okay, we have the words, we have the grammar. What does this sentence actually mean on a basic level?
And that's not even the final step, is it? There's still the whole context thing.
That's the top layer, pragmatic processing. This is crucial. It's interpreting that literal meaning within the bigger picture. What's the speaker's intent? Are they being sarcastic? Is this a formal instruction or a casual suggestion? What cultural nuances are at play? This connects the words to the real world.
So it's constantly moving between these levels.
Yes, and critically, it's interactive and predictive. Your brain isn't just passively receiving, it's constantly guessing, forming hypotheses about what's coming next based on what it's heard so far. If any of these stages hiccups, maybe you mishear a sound, or retrieving the word meaning is slow, or the grammar confuses you, or you miss the context, the brain's prediction fails. And that's when you get that feeling of a word just vanishing. It didn't register properly at one of these crucial stages.
Right. This is where it gets super interesting for me, because often the word we miss isn't some obscure vocabulary item. It's a word we know perfectly well. The issue isn't the definition. It's that spoken English doesn't sound like written English, does it? It's not neat little words separated by spaces.
Not at all. It's more like a continuous stream, a kind of acoustic soup, as you said earlier. And this is probably the biggest hurdle for many learners: connected speech. Think about it. If we pronounced every single sound clearly, conversations would take way longer. We naturally smooth things out for efficiency, but that efficiency comes at the cost of clarity for the listener sometimes.
So how does that actually work? How do the sounds change?
Well, there are several key processes. One is elision, which basically means sounds get dropped, especially between words. Think about next door. Do you really hear that T sound clearly? Often it sounds more like next door. Or fax becoming fax. The T just disappears to make it easier to say.
Like rock and roll, the D is gone.
Exactly. Or the word and often just becomes N, or even just N. Fish and chips. If your brain is listening for the full word and, it might miss that tiny sound completely.
Right, because you learned it as A and D, pronounced clearly.
Precisely. Then there's assimilation. This is when a sound changes to become more like a neighboring sound. Makes the transition smoother for the speaker, like 10 bags. Say it quickly. Often sound like 10 bags. The N sound, made with the tongue near the front, changes to an M sound, made with the lips, because the next sound, B, is also made of the lips.
Okay, I can hear that.
Or a really common one, did you? It almost always becomes didja. That D and J sound blend together. Again, if you're listening for two distinct words, did and you, didja can just fly past you.
It sounds like one weird word instead of two familiar ones.
Yeah. And related to that is liaison or linking. This is where sounds are joined together across word boundaries, especially a consonant sound at the end of one word linking to a vowel sound at the start of the next, like pick it up. Native speakers often say it like pick it up. Those sounds blend smoothly.
So the listener's job is to somehow chop that continuous stream back into individual words.
Exactly. Segmentation.
Yeah.
And these connected speech features make that segmentation really, really challenging.
Okay, so sounds get dropped, changed, linked. What else? You mentioned rhythm earlier.
Ah, yes. Reductions and weak forms. This is huge in English because it's a stress-timed language. This means we tend to put emphasis or stress on the important words, nouns, main verbs, adjectives, adverbs, the content words, and we kind of rush through or compress the less important ones.
Grammar words.
Yeah, the function words, articles like a, the, prepositions like to, oof, a, auxiliary verbs like can't, have, a. They carry grammar, but not the main meaning. In fast speech, these are almost always reduced, often down to the schwa sound, that neutral oo sound. It's the most common sound in English for a reason.
Like, I want to go.
Right, it becomes, I want to go, or a cup of tea becomes a cup of tea. What do you think becomes, what do you think?
And if you're expecting the full of or do you, you just miss it.
You miss it completely. Your brain doesn't register that super quick, weak sound as a word you learned. And missing those little words can really mess up your understanding of the sentence structure, even if you get the main nouns and verbs.
That's a really key point. It's not just about missing meaning, but missing the grammatical glue.
Absolutely. And then there's stress itself, where you put the stress in a word can change its meaning, like present, a gift, versus present, to give something. But also, sentence stress changes the focus. I didn't steal your wallet means something different from I didn't steal your wallet. If you misinterpret the speaker's intended stress, you might misunderstand their main point.
And of course, the elephant in the room, accents.
Accents and dialects, definitely. If you've mainly learned, say, standard American English, hearing a British accent that drops the R sounds, pak the ka, or an Australian accent with different vowel sounds, can make even familiar words sound completely alien at first.
That momentary confusion.
Can be just enough to make you miss the next few words while your brain tries to catch up.
And finally, those really subtle sound differences.
Minimal pairs. Yeah, English has lots of words that differ by only one tiny sound, like ship and sheep, or thin and fine. If your native language doesn't make that distinction, or you haven't trained your ears specifically for it, it's very easy to mishear or just fail to identify the word altogether.
Wow. Okay, so just dealing with the sounds of natural spoken English is like navigating an obstacle course.
It really is. It's acoustic gymnastics.
Okay, let's say we miraculously overcome the sound challenges. We hear the words correctly segmented. The battleground then shifts to meaning, right? And again, what's surprising is that even words we know can cause problems. This takes us into lexical semantic challenges.
Right. The most obvious one, of course, is just unfamiliar vocabulary. If you simply don't know the word, that's a dead end. It acts like a roadblock. Your brain stops, tries to guess from context, maybe replays the sound, and while it's doing that, the speaker has moved on. You fall behind. Too many unknown words, and the whole thing just collapses.
That makes sense. But what about words we do know?
That's where the ambiguity tax comes in. English is full of words with multiple meanings. Polysemy. Think about the word bank, riverbank, financial bank, or right, correct, direction, a privilege, or set. I think it has hundreds of dictionary definitions.
Hundreds. Wow.
Yeah, so every time you hear a word like that, your brain has to hold multiple possibilities in mind for a split second, waiting for the context to clarify which meaning is intended.
And that takes effort. It slows things down.
Absolutely. It puts a load on your working memory. If the context isn't immediately clear, or if the context itself is ambiguous, your brain might guess wrong. You might interpret, he went to the bank as the financial institution, but maybe the story was about fishing. You then misunderstand the rest, maybe feeling like you missed a crucial word later when actually you just picked the wrong meaning earlier.
I see. And that applies to words that sound the same too, like see and see.
Exactly. Homophones. They're. Your brain has to use context to pick the right one instantly.
Okay, so ambiguity is a big one. What else trips us up meaning-wise?
Non-literal language. This is a huge category. Idioms, phrasal verbs, slang.
Stuff where the meaning isn't just the sum of the parts.
Precisely. If someone says, he finally kicked the bucket, and you try to picture someone literally kicking a pail, it makes no sense.
Right. Your brain hits a wall.
A mental wall, exactly. Because the meaning, he died, isn't derivable from kick and bucket. The whole phrase acts like one single opaque vocabulary item. If you haven't learned that specific phrase, it's as good as an unknown word.
And phrasal verbs are notorious for this, aren't they? Look up, put up with, get over.
They really are. Does look up mean search for information or raise your eyes? Does take off mean remove clothing or an airplane departing? Context is key, but you also need to have learned the specific phrasal verb unit.
Okay. And speed is a factor too, even if we know the word.
Definitely. Speed and retrieval. Like we said, native speech is fast, maybe 120, 150 words per minute, sometimes more. Your brain needs to perform that whole process, hear the sound, match it to a word in your lexicon, confirm the meaning incredibly quickly. If your lexical retrieval is just a fraction too slow, you start lagging behind. By the time you've processed word number 1, the speaker is already on word number 3 or 4.
Creating a backlog.
A constant backlog. You're always playing catch up, and inevitably words get missed in the process. This really highlights the difference between passive vocabulary words you recognize when you read them slowly and active, rapidly accessible vocabulary needed for listening.
That's a useful distinction, passive versus active.
And one last thing in this area, collocations. These are words that naturally tend to go together.
Like heavy rain, not strong rain. Or make a decision, not do a decision.
Exactly. Native speakers have an intuitive feel for these pairings. While hearing strong rain might not completely break comprehension, it sounds slightly off. That slight offness can cause a tiny mental stumble, a moment of, wait, did I hear that right? It adds a small cognitive load. If you haven't learned vocabulary in these common chunks or collocations, understanding can be less smooth, less automatic, potentially leading to missed nuances or slight delays.
All right, so we've tackled sounds and word meanings, but you're saying even if we nail those, the way sentences are built can still throw us off. The structure itself.
Absolutely. Welcome to the grammar gauntlet. Sometimes the problem isn't the individual words, but how they're arranged. A major culprit here is complex sentence structures. We're talking long sentences, sentences with lots of clauses embedded within them.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Imagine hearing this. The report, which my colleague submitted late yesterday after arguing with the data team, unfortunately contains several inaccuracies that we only discovered this morning.
Okay, yeah, that's a mouthful.
It is. Look how much information is stuffed between the main subject, the report, and the main verb, contained. You have one embedded clause, then another bit of information. By the time you get to contained, your working memory might be struggling to hold on to the report. You lose the connection.
So your brain is trying to juggle all these side clauses.
Exactly. It's holding them in suspension, waiting to connect them back to the main idea. And for a non-native listener who's already working harder on sounds and words, this extra grammatical load can be overwhelming. Working memory just overflows. The beginning of the sentence might literally fade from conscious awareness before you reach the end, making it feel like words were missed. Long distances between subject and verb are a classic challenge.
And what about when the structure isn't the standard subject-verb-object order?
Right, structural deviations. The passive voice is a prime example. The decision was made by the committee. It flips the expected order. Instead of agent-action-recipient, it's often recipient-action by agent. This forces your brain to pause and reparse. Okay, who did what to whom? That brief pause can cause you to miss what comes next.
So it disrupts the flow.
It does, and so do inversions, where the typical word order is deliberately changed, often for emphasis.
Like, never have I seen such a mess.
Exactly. Or, not only did she finish the project, but she also won an award. The standard subject-verb order is flipped. Have I seen? Did she finish? This can be disorienting. It forces a quick mental recalculation of the grammar, and during that recalculation, you might miss the next few words.
And sometimes the words we think are missing aren't actually missing. They were just never said.
That's implicit grammar, or ellipsis. Native speakers do this constantly. We leave out words that are clearly implied by the context. If someone asks, who wants coffee? You don't usually say, I want coffee. You just say, I do. The want coffee is ellipsed, left out.
But a learner might be listening for the full grammatical structure.
They might, and when they don't hear want coffee, they might perceive it as a missing piece, leading to confusion, even though the meaning was perfectly clear to a native speaker. They expect explicitness.
And finally, in spoken language, we don't have commas or periods to guide us.
That's a huge difference from reading. The absence of punctuation. In speech, we rely entirely on prosody. The rhythm, the pauses, the intonation, the pitch changes to signal where clauses begin and end and how ideas relate.
Like a slight pause instead of a comma.
Right, or a rising intonation for a question. If you misinterpret these subtle auditory cues, maybe you don't notice a slight pause indicating a clause break. You might link ideas together incorrectly. You might misunderstand the whole structure of the thought because you missed the spoken punctuation.
Okay, this is bringing up a really important question for me. We've talked about the complexities of English sounds, words, grammar, but how much of this is just about our brain hitting its limits, the sheer cognitive load?
That's a massive factor. We're now entering the territory of cognitive bottlenecks. It's often less about the language itself and more about our brain's finite processing power. Think about working memory limits. Working memory isn't like a huge hard drive. It's more like your computer's RAM. It's a limited space where you actively juggle information right now.
Okay. Small active workspace.
Exactly. And when complex information like fast, unfamiliar English pours in relentlessly, that workspace just gets overloaded. Information gets pushed out before it's fully processed or linked to long-term memory.
Is that why sometimes you hear the start of a long sentence, but by the end, you've completely forgotten how it began?
That's precisely it. The earlier words literally vanish from your active working memory because new information crowded them out. They were missed because the system overloaded. Tied closely to this is processing speed lag. All those steps we talked about, acoustic analysis, finding the word, parsing the grammar, they all take time. Milliseconds, but time nonetheless. If your overall processing speed for English is slower than the speaker's delivery rate, say, they're speaking at 140 words per minute, but you can only process comfortably at 110, you're inevitably going to fall behind.
Like watching a video that's buffering.
Kind of. You're constantly trying to catch up. Words get missed simply because your brain doesn't have that tiny fraction of a second needed to fully engage with them before the next one arrives. There's just no time.
And stress. I imagine that throws a huge wrench in the works.
Oh, massively. We can call it the cognitive tax from stress. When you're feeling anxious, maybe worried about understanding, or afraid of making mistakes, your brain actually diverts resources. Stress hormones effectively shrink your available working memory capacity. It's like trying to run complex software on a computer that suddenly has half the RAM available.
So the worry itself eats up the brain power needed for listening.
Exactly. That internal monologue of worry, am I getting this? What if I don't understand? Directly competes with the incoming speech signal. It significantly increases the likelihood of missing words.
Wow. Okay, and then there's the big one. The habit that so many learners, myself included sometimes, fall into.
Ah, yes, the translation habit. This is perhaps the ultimate cognitive bottleneck for many.
Explain that. How does translating in your head cause missed words?
Well, think about the process. You hear the English words. Your brain sends them to your native language, L1, for translation. You process the meaning in L1. You maybe formulate a response or understanding in L1. Then you translate that back into English. It's this multi-step, indirect route. And it is incredibly slow and mentally taxing compared to processing directly in English.
So while you're busy doing that translation loop for sentence 1,
the speaker is already well into sentence 2 or 3. You're perpetually lagging behind, stuck processing the past instead of listening to the present.
you're essentially deaf to the current words because your brain is occupied elsewhere.
Precisely. It creates this chronic backlog. You miss words not because you didn't hear them, but because your cognitive resources were completely tied up in the translation detour. Breaking this habit and learning to think directly in English is fundamental for fluency and real-time comprehension.
Okay, let's shift perspective a bit. We've looked deep inside the listening process, sounds, words, grammar, cognitive limits. But sometimes the problem isn't internal, it's external. It's about the context surrounding the words.
Absolutely. Even if the sounds are clear, the words known, the grammar simple, and your brain isn't overloaded, you can still miss the meaning or feel like you've missed words due to contextual and pragmatic challenges. A big one is simply lack of background knowledge. Listening isn't just decoding sounds, it's integrating those sounds with what you already know about the world or about the specific topic being discussed. If someone starts talking using technical jargon you don't know, or referencing cultural events you're unaware of, or historical figures you haven't heard of, the words might be simple, but they don't connect to anything.
They don't land anywhere.
Exactly. They lack a framework, a schema for interpretation. Your brain struggles to see the relevance, to predict what might come next. This can lead to you either tuning out because it feels overwhelming, or getting bogged down trying to process every single detail because you can't distinguish the important from the unimportant.
So not knowing the topic well enough can make it feel like you're missing words.
It really can. It increases the overall cognitive load significantly. And sometimes the problem is more straightforward. It's the speaker themselves. Speaker delivery issues.
Like someone who mumbles or talks way too fast.
Exactly. Poor articulation, a very heavy accent you're unfamiliar with, mumbling, or just an excessively fast pace.
Oh.
All these force your brain to work much, much harder just at the basic level of identifying the sounds and segmenting the words.
It drains your mental battery just trying to get the signal.
Precisely. That extra effort leads to rapid listening fatigue, which we'll talk more about, making you much more likely to miss words as the conversation goes on. The signal quality really matters.
And there are the unwritten rules. The cultural stuff.
Yes. The cultural and social norms, the pragmatics. Misinterpreting these can definitely lead to feeling like you missed something crucial. Think about indirectness. In some cultures, a request is very direct. Please do X. In many English-speaking contexts, especially professional ones, it might be phrased much more softly. Perhaps we could consider doing X, or it might be helpful if X was done.
And if you're expecting a direct command,
you might miss the request entirely. You heard the words, but you missed their function, their pragmatic intent. It feels like a communication gap. Like a word was missing that would have made it a clear instruction.
Sarcasm and humor fit in here too.
Definitely. If you miss the sarcastic tone, you take the literal meaning, which is completely wrong. Understanding implied meaning, politeness strategies, turn-taking cues, these are all pragmatic skills. Failing to grasp them can lead to significant misunderstandings.
And finally, our own minds can play tricks on us, right? Our biases.
Yes, listener biases act like filters. Confirmation bias is a key one here. If you strongly expect someone to say a particular thing or hold a particular view, your brain might actually filter the incoming sound to match your expectation.
So you literally hear what you expected to hear, not what was actually said.
It can happen. You might misinterpret words or genuinely not register words that contradict your pre-existing belief or expectation. This leads to an inaccurate understanding where you feel certain objective words were missed or misstated when it was actually your internal filter at work.
This brings us to something really crucial, I think, the internal state. We've covered language, cognition, context. But how much does our own mindset, our psychology, affect our ability to listen effectively?
It's huge. Often it's the biggest factor, especially for learners who have good technical skills but still struggle. This is the psychological dimension, and the number one enemy here is often performance anxiety. The fear of not understanding, the fear of looking stupid, the fear of having to ask, could you repeat that?
That feeling is horrible.
It is. And what does it lead to? Usually excessive self-monitoring. You stop focusing fully on the speaker and start focusing inwards. Your internal dialogue takes over. Am I getting this? Did I understand that last point? What if they ask me something? Oh no, I missed that bit.
And that inner chatter uses up brain power.
Precisely the brain power, the attention and working memory that you desperately need for actually listening and processing the incoming information.
So the anxiety creates the very problem you're afraid of.
It's a classic vicious cycle. Anxiety leads to distraction. Distraction leads to missed words reinforces the anxiety. It's self-sabotage.
And just the sheer effort involved.
Yeah.
It must be exhausting, right? Trying to process a language that isn't your native one.
Absolutely. That leads to listening fatigue. Think about it. Every step we've discussed, filtering sounds, accessing words, parsing grammar, interpreting pragmatics, requires more conscious effort for a non-native listener than for a native speaker, for whom much of it is automatic. That constant, high-level cognitive work drains your mental energy much faster. Your mental battery runs low.
And when you're fatigued.
Your attention wavers, your focus blurs, your working memory capacity decreases. You start missing words simply because your brain is too tired to keep up the intense processing effort required.
Which can then lead to just giving up, I suppose.
Yes, frustration and avoidance. If listening consistently feels like a struggle, if you constantly feel lost or fatigued, it's natural to become frustrated and demotivated. Sometimes learners reach a point where they just mentally check out in challenging situations. They might nod and smile, but they've stopped actively engaging, stopped putting in the effort needed to understand because it just feels too hard or too punishing.
That sounds like a really tough place to be.
It is. And that's why the last psychological piece is so important. Lack of self-compassion. Learners can be incredibly hard on themselves. I'm so bad at listening, I'll never get this. Why am I missing such simple words?
That negative self-talk.
Exactly. It just fuels the anxiety, keeps the stress levels high, and prevents learning. You need to be able to step back and say, okay, I missed that word. That's interesting. Why might that have happened? What can I learn from this? Embracing imperfection. Seeing missed words not as failures but as data points guiding your learning is absolutely key for maintaining motivation and making progress. You have to be kind to your learning brain.
Okay, we've done a deep dive into the problems, from sounds getting mangled to our brains overloading to anxiety getting in the way. We've diagnosed the issues. Now the crucial part, the solutions. Let's build that roadmap, that toolkit of strategies.
Right. We need targeted solutions for each challenge area. Let's start back with the sounds. Mastering phonology to deal with connected speech. One really powerful technique is shadowing. This means listening to a short piece of native audio and repeating it immediately, trying to mimic the speaker's rhythm, intonation, and pronunciation, including all the reductions and links.
So you're talking almost at the same time as the recording.
Almost simultaneously, yes. It forces your mouth and your ear to get used to the flow of natural speech, not just isolated words. It builds that physical and auditory intuition for how sounds blend together.
Okay, shadowing. What else for sounds?
Transcribing short segments. This can feel tedious, but it's incredibly effective. Take 30 seconds, maybe a minute of audio and try to write down every single sound you hear. It forces you to pay hyper attention to those weak forms, those dropped sounds, those little words that usually fly under the radar. You'll start noticing the ands that sound like and, the afs that sound like.
Makes you confront the reality of spoken English.
Exactly. And of course, exposure to diverse accents. Don't just listen to one type of English. Seek out speakers from the UK, Australia, India, Ireland, different parts of the US. The more accents you expose your ear to, the more flexible your auditory processing becomes.
Okay, so train the ear for sounds. What about building up that vocabulary strength, dealing with ambiguity and retrieval speed?
For building lexical strength, prioritize. Focus on high-frequency vocabulary first, the words that make up the bulk of everyday conversation. Don't get bogged down in obscure words initially. And crucially, learn vocabulary in context and chunks. Don't just memorize word lists. Learn words as part of common phrases or collocations. Learn make a decision, heavy rain, keen interest.
Why chunks?
Because your brain then retrieves the whole chunk as one unit, which is much faster than retrieving individual words and assembling them. It dramatically speeds up your retrieval process. Using spaced repetition systems, SRS, like Anki or Memrise, can really help automate the recall of these chunks.
Got it. Learn high-frequency words and common phrases. Now, what about tackling that tricky grammar, those complex sentences?
Here, conscious analysis helps. Analyze transcripts of spoken English. Find examples of those long sentences with embedded clauses, passive voice, inversions. Read them, listen to the audio simultaneously, and notice how the speaker uses pauses and intonation to mark the structure.
So, connect the written structure to the spoken cues.
Yes. And then practice with focused listening sessions. Maybe for 10 minutes, your only goal is to identify the main subject and verb in every sentence you hear. Or focus specifically on listening for prepositions. Break down the task.
Okay, makes sense. And for optimizing the brain itself, reducing that cognitive overload.
To optimize cognitive processing, work on your focus and stress management. Practices like mindfulness or meditation have been shown to strengthen attention networks and help manage the cognitive drain from anxiety.
So calming the mind helps listening.
significantly. Also, be strategic. Use pre-listening preparation. If you know the topic of a meeting or lecture, do a little reading beforehand. Look up key terms. This provides background knowledge, reducing the amount of completely new information your brain has to process in real time. It lowers the cognitive load.
Gives your brain some hooks to hang the new information on.
Exactly. And the biggest cognitive shift: consciously practice thinking in English. Try to narrate your day internally in English, formulate opinions directly in English, stop yourself when you catch your brain defaulting to that L1 translation step.
Bypass the translation habit altogether.
It's the most direct route to faster processing and freeing up cognitive resources. It takes effort, but it pays off massively.
Finally, cultivating that mental resilience. Dealing with the inner game.
Yes, cultivating resilience, mindset, first and foremost. Embrace imperfection. You will miss words. Everyone does, even native speakers sometimes. See it as feedback, not failure.
Easier said than done sometimes.
It is, but it's crucial. And when you do miss a word, don't get stuck on it. Focus on the main meaning. Try to infer from the context. And critically, keep listening. Don't mentally rewind and try to figure out the missed word, because then you'll definitely miss the next words. Keep the flow going.
Stay with the speaker.
Stay with the speaker. And be proactive. Use active listening strategies. Learn to politely ask for clarification. Sorry, could you say that last part again? Or what did you mean by specific phrase? Or even paraphrasing. So if I understand correctly, you're saying...
It's not a sign of weakness, it's engagement.
Exactly. It shows you're invested. And finally, manage that fatigue. Recognize when your brain is tired. Take breaks. Maybe shorter, more focused listening practice sessions are better than one long, exhausting one. Be strategic about your energy. Hashtag outro. So just to wrap up, that feeling of missing words, it's normal. It really is. It comes from this complex interplay between the tricky nature of spoken English and the very real limits of our human brains. But the path to clarity isn't magic. It's about understanding these specific challenges and then applying targeted strategies diligently. It's a holistic thing. You need the linguistic knowledge, the cognitive training, and that psychological self-awareness and resilience.
Yeah, and I think the shift is moving from seeing it as this constant frustration, this skip button you can't control, to seeing it as a series of identifiable issues you can tackle. Every time you notice a reduction or figure out an idiom from context or manage your anxiety enough to ask for clarification, you're actively strengthening those pathways in your brain. You're training yourself. The words are out there. You're just building the skills to catch them all. So we really hope this deep dive has given you some powerful insights and practical tools. We encourage you to start applying these strategies today. At the end of this episode, must mention like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel.